they had to arrive very quickly, and
And you're entertained enough in the meantime to like forgive those things, hopefully. But yeah, that is one of my favorite scenes.
I never heard your girlfriend's invitation to Mercy.
No, yeah.
I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
It sounds vaguely insulting.
It's pretty insulting.
So she's got the first. A much longer scene, and all this stuff was longer. Not that I pine for the movie itself to be longer. Sometimes I wonder there's just several theories of kind of cutting a movie. Some are that you leave the scenes whole and intact. I was supposed to have just been throwing up there, and so that you get the full resonance and let one scene play out and sacrifice another. And the other kind of school of thought is to just trim within every single scene, and that was sort of what happened with this movie. So it's sort of a lot of the scenes, for the sake of compression, are reduced to like a couple of lines, sort of telling people where the characters were at as plot points, kind of en route to the big moment, which here it is, Sunday morning.
Revered Father.
I thought it was really strange to me. I don't know, this whole sequence of getting ready by the Japanese, it takes the surprise element out of was it in the script, this whole...
I don't know, but I find it now
like
kind of creepy
page.
since they're all kamikaze pilots and they're all getting ready to die.
Yeah.
I keep on thinking about how recently something like this actually did happen. It's so strange. We shot, of course, there was a lot of controversy about putting the Japanese flag on a United States aircraft carrier and blah, blah, blah. And some people are very upset by that because we used the real carrier to recreate the Japanese carriers. And I think kind of a lot of it seems moot now in retrospect, particularly since the Japanese are now, for the first time in their history, reconfiguring their military to allow for some offensive capability in order that they might assist the U.S. and British forces in what they're calling the war on terrorism.
Everything that a film is about, a film has to be encapsulated in a very simple idea. If you want to do something really, really complex, that's possible. I mean, certainly there are complex films, but sometimes if the nature of the material and what you want to say is very complicated, you start getting into 3.5-hour films, or again, you might as well be doing a documentary.
That's too big.
What you try to be is historically accurate as possible within a dramatic context, and we're not making a documentary here. This is a motion picture people have to pay money for, and when the picture costs as much as Pearl Harbor costs, you got to make sure a lot of people pay money to go see the movie and are entertained by it. Entertainment is our first and foremost thing for an audience, because they don't want to be bored. They want to be moved emotionally. We want to transport them to another place, another time, excite them, make them fall in love, make them laugh, make them cry a little bit, and hopefully walk out, feeling that they've learned something and been entertained. And you take the facts of Pearl Harbor, you lay them out through the movie. You can't be 100% accurate in what we do. If you're making a documentary, it's a different story. And if you look at the history of Pearl Harbor, you'll find that even the books and the historians disagree on what happened. Of course, the time it happened is fairly well documented, and the amount of planes is fairly well documented. Although I've read varying numbers of planes in varying books. So, we did the best that we could in making a movie that was entertaining and also as accurate as you can be. And I think what you try to do is entice an audience to go find out about Pearl Harbor, find out the actual facts, the stuff that we couldn't get into or the stuff that we didn't have time to do. That is something that excited audiences, and I'm sure their website, after they saw the picture, the real Pearl Harbor website, the historical one, had a lot of hits, and I'm sure a lot of books out of the library were taken to the library, and a lot of documentaries and books were bought on the actual Pearl Harbor because we piqued interest. I mean, people couldn't believe this actually happened to this country.
In my career, I laugh at that now when people talk about accuracy and things like that. I mean, unless you are actually shifting, unless you are actually changing the course of history in the film, compression and storytelling are essential to filmmaking. So, like I said, to me, a film should always be about an idea. You know, so when I play Doolittle, I play Doolittle in such a way that he supports the idea of that film. And when you play Roosevelt, you play Roosevelt in the context that he supports the idea of that film. You know, a film is never about people. It's about an idea that they represent, and or at least good films are. And so I just, I know that some people thought that the film was, you know, that there was, you know, some conveniences as far as the storytelling was concerned. But my attitude is, so what? You know, I saw the film and I thought it was a great film.
When you go to high school, and that's when I learned about, you know, World War II, you get, you know, a couple hours on Pearl Harbor at the most. I mean, there's a chapter in one of your history book, American history books on Pearl Harbor, which basically just touches the surface. And you don't get the in-depth kind of essay on the real historical facts of Pearl Harbor. And, you know, by making a movie, we all do enormous amount of research to try to be as accurate as you can, and you try to sift through all those facts and say, okay, we can use this, we can't use that. So, you know, we became experts on Pearl Harbor. We're certainly not historians, and we're not like Jack Green, who was our historian from the Navy. We don't have the depth of knowledge that he has because he's been studying it for years. You know, Jack Green was somebody the Navy gave us to work on Pearl Harbor, and he was our resident historian because I think he's either at the Naval Academy and is the resident expert on Pearl Harbor, and knows the times, dates, how much fuel they had in the planes, which pilots were flying which planes, knew it backwards and forwards. So whenever there was a question on the set, what is accurate, what should happen here, you know, he was there to support us and give us the right answers. You know, the wardrobe people consulted him on what looked accurate and what was accurate for the period and the time, and so we used him in many facets, from props to wardrobe to dialogue to where the medals were on the uniforms.
It makes really great films is, I mean, time. You know, time is money in movies, and the amount of time you can have to get the coverage you want to have and to compose the shots you want to have. And Bay, I think, did a beautiful job with posing the shots of what he wanted to do and what he wanted to see in the frame. I think he's great with a camera.
Michael is a very bright, energetic, committed, driven filmmaker. He's somebody that I think was born to do it. It was his staircase in life. It was his way of showing the world how talented he is. I think they tell me that when he was in high school and he took pictures, he was a photographer, and they were always the best that people had ever seen, and he always had a unique vision for things, saw things differently than we do. And fortunately for him, he pursued it. He went after it. He went to college and went to art school and took filmmaking and photography and kind of went out on his own, shot his own little commercial and took it around to various production houses, and they saw how talented he was, and got hired and started doing commercials and videos, built his career, and did a lot of award-winning videos and commercials, and we worked together doing a video back in the days when we did Days of Thunder. He did one of the videos for us because we saw the two videos he'd done previously. In fact, it was really only one on Donny Osmond. I thought that whoever did this is enormously talented, has a unique vision. And we hired him to do that video and did a wonderful job. And then a few years later, when we were mounting Bad Boys, we saw a new reel that Michael had done. It was so interesting and funny and exciting that we brought him in to interview to do the movie. Growing up, I had an uncle who was a photo buff and was fairly wealthy and would buy a camera a week. And I would always get the stuff that was, a couple years, 3-4 years old. He'd throw them to me. I remember he gave me one when I was like 5 or 6 years old, an old Argus camera. It was one of those little box cameras. And I started taking pictures. And then I get another, by the time I was 13, I had another camera that was a little more professional, and you had to set the f-stops, and always had a camera around my neck, and took a lot of photographs, and in high school, learned how to develop pictures, and entered a lot of contests and won a lot of awards through National Scholastic and Kodak Awards. And then when I went to college, I did portfolios that were, took some photography classes, and always kind of, loved taking pictures, and which of course kind of drove me into the movie business because it's motion pictures. So I thought moving pictures would be more fun, although I never quite did that. So that, that's how I kind of started. And then like 5-6 years ago, I said I should really start doing this again and start documenting some of the things that I see on the movie sets. And Pearl Harbor was such a great subject matter because you had a director who's so visual that everything he sets up is going to be a great photograph, and you had the period, and you had the war, and you had the explosions, and you had the amount of effort it took to make the picture, and the amount of technicians. So you had all these great visual images, and so whenever I was on the set, I had a couple cameras with me and shot a lot of pictures. Unfortunately, they were put in the book on the making of the movie, so it worked out really well.
About heroism and what is a hero and so forth in the context of now versus then. Things are just a lot simpler now. Things are a lot simpler for people now. Everything is laser guided and computer operated, and we live in a kind of a you have a generation of people now who know nothing about military service. They can't even conceive of what military service is. When I was in high school, I remember in 1975. The war was over in 1975 in Vietnam, and I was finishing, I believe it was over in August of 75, and so 2 months prior, at the conclusion of my junior year of high school, I was looking toward, the summer, and then the commencement of my last year of high school, and I thought, well, what am I going to do about the war in Vietnam? I'm eligible. And I thought, I can't remember if they had a lottery back then, or I just remember saying to my family, I remember my mother sitting at a table crying, because I said to my father, who was in the Marine Corps, I said, I'm going to go ROTC. And I tried to get into the Judge Advocate General program and go to law school through the military. And that would have put me in the military for 7 years of school and then 7 years of service to them. And we're talking about 15 years almost of my life in the military in order to get a free education and so forth, and avoid active duty in the military, over in Vietnam, and which was everybody's goal, basically. And I remember, these were real decisions I had to make back then. And today, people don't have to make those decisions. I mean, there's a good argument that to be made that people today don't have to make those decisions because of the way that decisions were made 50 years ago, and 55 years ago, and 60 years ago. But you have a generation of people today who just the idea that you were home and you were on the stoop of your house in Brooklyn, or you were in the fields of your farm in Nebraska, or you were on the beach in California, wherever you are, and you just jumped up and you went to an office and you signed a piece of paper, and the next thing you were in the army. The next thing you know, you went to Germany. The next thing you know, you went to kill Germans, or you were in the Pacific and you were killing Japanese people, and that is something that is just inconceivable to young people today. It's just inconceivable, the difference. I mean, the world is so different now than it was back then. And I think that it's actually, in a funny way, I think that it's actually hurt the country. Not that, that we need a war. I mean, God's sakes, we don't need that. But a lack of that kind of commitment, I think has made young people, when they don't commit to an idea and service to your country, or service to some component of the society you live in, is certainly something outside of yourself. And when you don't have that element to put your energy into, all they think about is themselves, which is, I think, a big, common complaint we have today with young people.
Very close contacts with the heads of the various veteran organizations in Southern California and in Pearl Harbor, and invited them all to the set in Hawaii and in Mexico. Wherever we were, we invited veterans that were close by to be a part of it and see what we're doing. And it gives you a great feeling that they have the opportunity to see the making of a movie that unfortunately they were at the time and had to deal with the tragedy of it. But the one thing that you take away from this, at least that I took away from this, was the premiere in Hawaii. Because we knew the movie was finished, the stress was done. It was just the stress that does this picture captivate an audience. We went there, all the cast, and Michael and myself, and a lot of the executives from Disney, and we're on the John Stennis, which is this mighty new carrier that the Navy has, one of the best in their and their fleet. It's all decked out. There are bleachers there. We've created a theater to show the movie. And as the sun goes down and we're getting ready for the ceremony before the picture and picture itself, in the background they've lit up the Arizona Memorial and they've lit up the Missouri. The Arizona is still bubbling oil up, as it's beneath the sea, trapped with a lot of the men who lost their lives there. And then you have the Missouri, where the peace treaty was signed by the Japanese. So you have the history of the war right in the background, and right to the left of that is the screen that's showing Pearl Harbor. So that's very emotional. And at the end of the movie, they lift the screen, and sitting on the stage are the veterans who are still alive, as many as we can get, both the soldiers who were there and the nurses that were there. And we got up and they played the Star Spangled Banner, and these veterans, some of them in wheelchairs, all stood up and saluted. Getting out of their wheelchairs was really an emotional moment for me. They're very proud of the picture, and that's the gratification you get when you make a picture that moves people, entertains people. And for these people, it was really special. It's something they could show their grandkids and their great-grandkids, their experience and their valor in what they did and what they accomplished with their careers and what happened to them in Pearl Harbor. And we read about this bilge bay that was filling up with water, and there was one very small opening, and one of the men who was kind of too big to fit through the opening, he was the one who pulled everybody through it, pushed everybody out to make sure that they could live, and yet he perished. And there were constant stories like that. I remember one story which is a little humorous, and one of the officers was at home when the bomb started dropping, and he's running downstairs, and all of a sudden he runs back upstairs, and his wife says, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" She said, "I forgot my tie." So they were so drilled that they had to be in uniform, in proper uniform. Even as the bombs were dropping, he was going to make sure he had his tie on.
That occurred while we were shooting this film, that we had so many extras, and a lot of them were military, but a lot of them weren't. And when we ran past right there with the guns, the guys with the guns, some of those guys had never, really fired guns before, and they had blanks in their guns, which aren't, all that dangerous, but at close range could, blow your kneecap off or your head off, for that matter. And I remember that being one of the most frightening things that we had to do on the shoot, was run in front of these guys.
Firing me, I know. I think they kind of thought it was funny if they could hit the actor with the blank. That was a cool CG shot. I like this moment where he thinks it's a dad.
Yeah.
That was just creepy, man.
So creepy. There's no more. This
is all Fort Island, right? This is all Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, that's actually in Pearl Harbor. We actually blew up we made that building.
Yeah, we made that building, but we were causing explosions, having planes fly over with zeros, and doing all this stuff at the island where it actually took place, which was
incredible.
Really wild, yeah.
This is pretty eerie, watching that go through people's legs. I think that was a CG shot. This is in Rosarita again. This whole
gimbal Josh is referring to.
This is the gimbal. This thing is the largest gimbal ever made, and it turns that ship on end. When I came into Rosarita, I drove in. This guy picked me up at the San Diego airport, and we drove across the border. When I saw that piece of set, it was at like a 45-degree angle on its side, and it had extras falling off. All these extras, all these guys here, all these sailors were falling off of it, and literally, really falling off it into this tank. And it was one of the most impressive. When I saw that, I realized I wasn't in Minnesota anymore. I was really doing something that was kind of not many people get to see this kind of stuff, and how dangerous it is. And it's amazing that not too many people got hurt.
In the original script, he was supposed to shoot. They were supposed to come up to him and shoot that guy. I guess they said that was too vicious. One of the other things with this attack sequence is that everybody sort of grudgingly conceded that it was effective. One of the things that critics missed, and I think perhaps may reflect on now, is the degree to which it gives one the sense of how horrible it is to sort of be in a war, be under attack, be bombed, how terrifying it is, and what, like, each, you get a real sense of each person falling off that boat as an individual, breaking his neck or his back or something, and it's, it's not just like numbers of people, casualty lists. There are people all sort of suffering and dying. This is a spectacular CG shot here.
Spectacular. One of the criticisms that I heard a few times from one of the only criticisms I heard from the people who were actually there at Pearl Harbor when this happened was that there were too many planes in the sky. Like, not all these planes would have been. You wouldn't have seen this swarm of planes that you see right now. But at the same time, there were never more than 161, which is how many were actually there. That's I think they stuck to that. Michael stuck to that. Incredible shots. All of these shots, you really get a sense of what it's like to be in there. We had a few days off when this stuff was being shot. Look at that. That's for real. That right there is, it's a piece of a ship.
Well, you see the background has been integrated into it, so I mean by this is just captivating, of course, very stark visual image. So that's a real famous photograph of the flag in the water.
And the flag waving, a lot of people had a lot of problem with back then that would have no problem with it now, again, because of the attack on September 11th.
I think it's just demonstrative of the fact that people didn't really, had kind of, in a way, forgotten what happens, what the profound effect on the psyche, not only people who are attacked, but on like a whole nation, when you feel threatened all of a sudden and kind of under siege, and the way people react. And it wasn't that it was a jingoistic movie, it was that it was reflecting a kind of emerging nationalism and a sort of unifying patriotism that was happening at the time that's not unlike what's happening now.
Yeah. I think we're watching the new version.
Yeah, there's been some more creepy graphic things. Boxer.
Yeah, that is a boxer. Stuff. Yeah.
It's very effectively, very expertly. He was the right guy to do this stuff here. It's as good as anybody in terms of making something effective. And a lot of things, the other thing is that, like, Private Ryan with the graphic sort of violence was a rated R movie. This was PG-13, so it was supposed to really show blood or do anything quite as stirring and not stirring, but as disturbing in a way as the Ryan stuff. And I think he conveyed the sense of the hideousness of the attack, as well as kept it on the side of, not being so gross or whatever, or as graphic. So like kids saw it. Although it's still, I think, appropriately disturbing.
Yes, it's a tough sequence to watch. What disturbs me the most is the amount of squirming people, and the long shots are really disturbing to me. Like, that's disturbing right there, but seeing all these people like this is really disturbing, because in a way, you're close enough to see that they're humans, but far enough away to see a lot of them being cremated, basically. And that's the images that we saw on TV, a couple months ago, a month ago, on September 11th were, just some of the saddest things I've ever seen in my life. And this had the responsibility of recreating something with that sort of effect. And it's a hard situation to be.
Yeah, I think they thought, this is what they thought in the hospitals here, and we're in New York now. This is the kind of thing they thought they were going to be getting, trying to set up for these triage units. After the World Trade Center attacks, they thought it'd be like this. Of course, there were far fewer wounded from the World Trade Center attacks. Almost everybody was killed. Whereas here, you had a lot of wounded, but the state of medicine and their readiness was such that many, many, many of them died. Although there were a lot of brave nurses who saved an awful lot of lives. That's hideous.
That's the new version, I guess.
Yeah. And this schmear cam thing, this is a 45-degree shutter, but that schmeary blurred thing was that right there was a sort of stylistic choice that they made. Some people I talked to complained bitterly, and others thought it was effective. It's just a subjective thing. Obviously, this is where Michael's gone in and done his cut, because I haven't seen anything different with the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
I think the only thing different really is this.
Yeah,
battle
I
sequence.
love this shot right there. That shot of him looking up at them. It really puts you inside. Obviously, puts you inside of what it must be like. It's a really great shot. It's so white, you know. I guess it kind of goes along with what must be Michael's theory of death. This sequence right here was interesting because we're patching together right now some sort of story to continue the attack and to make us move to a place where we can get planes. It wasn't so much scripted as it was improvised as we did it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't. As I remember it, it was kind of like we were writing it out in the day, trying to figure out a way to make this.
It's one of these sort of logistical things on where are we on the airfield, how do we get from here to there, and we just kept going through all these different, because the logic of it was kind of uncertain in terms of how we got here, when we got here, and trying to keep the continuity in the audience's mind seemed like almost impossible in a day, so we kept on trying to introduce lines which just seemed hopelessly expository, like, oh, well, now we made it over here, but in a few minutes we're going to head back to the other airfield, and this is where they keep the... Ultimately, I think people, if you get them invested in what's happening, are asking a lot of questions. And it was truly what they did, was they drove to the airfield where they were preparing the planes, which were bombed, to get into a couple of them, two guys who actually got up in the air.
There's a shot coming up with Pat Healy, the actor who played the newsreel photographer. Michael had this idea that you could see the newsreel footage as you've been seeing throughout the attack, right there, and he would fall into his own frame.
Film his own death.
Yeah, film his own death, and that was a pretty. I thought that was a good kind of. I don't know what dimension you enter there, but
Try to wipe him off. Don't.
Trouble with, because Tom looks up in the wrong direction at the high-level bombers, where he's not looking.
I think they probably just thought, well, if we don't put him in the frame, it's going to look weird, and they should have flipped the negative, it seems like. The other side, yeah.
This whole
big
sequence
set
at the
piece
top.
shot caused all this panic, all these scripts going off, and the actors running over them, and the actors firing guns, and it was just a sort of bedlam of chaos, which was effective cinematically, but at the time seemed kind of hectic.
Yeah,
you can see.
Ooh,
That's a new shot.
That's a new shot. This whole thing really got me. The Tommy guns aren't gonna reach. You know, I mean, not to nitpick, but there it is. That's the deal. And that was.
Wait. Was his brain hanging up?
That was more so than before. They added something there. The ominous kind of them coming through the smoke that's being picked up. It's like it's kind of like a Jaws effect or something like that, you know.
It looks
This
like
is
strangely
gorgeous.
mixed media. All this stuff looks different. This was a big shot of the dude reacting to nothing, and that was a CG explosion that was put in later.
Yeah.
And we were mostly reacting to like some dust fans. But it looks good. I mean, you can't really tell.
Yeah. Here we come to the little bunker that somebody jumps over really well. Somebody taught us how to jump over these bunkers. We had people on the set the whole time.
Yeah, dude, it was Sizemore.
It was.
Sizemore was like, in the Saving Private Ryan thing, we did it this way. Tom, we went to a boot camp too. We went to a real boot camp with the Army. Who was yours with? He was like, it was actor camp. Yeah. Was he dispensed his advice freely?
Yeah. Well, we did have a lot of people on the set who were there to, tell us what to do as far as like how to act military like, how to load your gun, how to talk into the little throat piece there.
I don't think anybody got that. You're supposed to hold it close to your throat, because instead of picking up sounds, it would pick up like the throat vibrations or whatever. And if you didn't hold it against it, it wouldn't broadcast. I think it just looks weird because it's never quite explained, but it was in fact authentic.
Yeah. And so like over the headphones, we're hearing everybody sound kind of like Ned from South Park. Are real, not this one right here, obviously, because we couldn't wreck the plane. That's. Oh no, wait, we already passed the ones of us driving.
Yeah. Those were real. The planes were right over our heads.
Yeah, they were. They looked as though the car had wings for a while, and that is an actual plane about 10 feet above our heads.
This is weird. You get different levels of grain in some of these shots, and I'm not sure. I know they shot it all on the same media, but they may have been. As you see, it gets more or less grainy. I think that's a device used to sort of create a sense of chaos or something in the viewer. Because it may be different film stocks. I don't know.
I think it's more or
Could
less.
just be a mistake.
Yeah, it could.
Look at that. It looks almost like 16 mil. You get so much grain.
That's where we're looking back and forth at each other here. We're actually taxiing. We are.
We're scooting those things on the runway.
We had somebody behind us, steering, trying, but we were allowed to steer ourselves in a way.
We got around. We spun the planes around a few times.
Yeah.
Tried to turn around and stuff.
It's fun. In those old planes. Story that I'll never forget is that, and I get this feeling still, the year and a half later, the just the excitement, like the sheer, like, little kid feeling of, like, we're doing some really cool stuff.
Trailer shots, such.
Yeah.
A lot of the bullet hits and showing them streak through the air is an effect added by the computer later, and it's what, like, makes the whole thing kind of tie together.
Things called tracers, and they come out like one every 50th bullet or something like that, right?
So you can see where you're shooting. Yeah.
So it's a bullet that kind of creates a streak through the air. Us having no idea what we're shooting. When you see our faces, we're just randomly looking around.
Literally without any rhyme, reason, sense. Look around, be scared. All right, now you're happy. Why are we happy? Are you happy? You're happy. All right. Love of your life just died. All right, now smile.
The tower scene. These guys had to get up in this little tower and shoot these huge guns. And this tower, the planes that were actually flying by the tower were flying pretty close, like closer than any normal person would like to see a plane coming to their in their general direction. But the actors who were up there were a little freaked out, and I think Tom gave them a good talk, along with Michael, because they were acting like, I think.
But later on in that other shot, Sizemore was like, "This whole thing's crazy. Someone's gonna get hurt. Ben, you gotta talk to him." And I was like, "All right, whatever." I was like, "Michael, some of the guys don't know what they're doing." Michael came back over and he was like, "What do you mean you don't know what you're doing?" Tom's like, "These kids, they're scared."
Yeah, that's good. I think, ILM outdid themselves in these. I can't tell. Some of these shots are fake. Some of the shots.
Yeah, you really can't
are
tell
real.
the difference between actual planes and computer-generated planes,
Yeah.
which is astonishing.
Yeah. Amazing. And I guess you guys were probably at home. You could guess, and my guess is that you get it wrong 50% of the time. I was there for a lot of these shots. I don't know.
Oh, that's fake.
That's crazy.
That's a great shot. Back device where it's like, "Yeah, I saw us playing chicken earlier." Well, it's like usually that thing where you see something that's just out of the blue in a movie about why is he so good at flipping quarters through his fingers, and then it just turns out that in the prison camp, you know what I mean? Like, we can get out of here if someone can just handle a quarter the right way.
He was something that I really believed in from the bottom of my soul, because I really believed in the screenplay, and I really believed in Michael Bay's talent to tell this story. And I fought tooth and nail to make sure this picture got made. And the fact that we got it made, and B, it became an enormous success, is very gratifying for me in my career. When you have a picture that is approaching $450 million just in box office, that's only part of the story. That just shows that our gut and our feeling for the project and our emotions and the hard work we put into it made it all financially rewarding. But I think the picture for me is emotionally and creatively rewarding because of the story we told, of the characters that are in the picture, of the actors that are in the picture, the technicians that worked on the movie, the studio that financed it. It was a win-win situation for everybody, and I feel a great satisfaction that I could be a part of it and help get this movie made. Great story. They move people. They make people think. They make people laugh. They express ideas. that maybe you had not thought of yourself. You get involved in characters and emotions and stories, and that's what a great book does. Great books envelops you, makes you feel warm. You can't wait to get home to read it. You don't want it to end. A good movie is the same way. A good movie you don't want to end. You want it to keep going because it's such a great experience. When I'm sitting in some of these movies, some of Lean's and The Godfather, I don't want those pictures to stop. They're such great characters. I want to keep living the lives of those characters.
A guy named Joe Foss. He was I think the #1 ace in the Pacific Fleet. He was an older pilot at the time. He was about 27. I think he was 27 years old. They called him Old Man. He would tell us about these dogfights, and the amount you had to look around, and the amount of space you had to see and be aware of, and like how much you could take and stuff like that. And he said it was kind of a gentlemanly thing, and these fights were more like duels. That they had. I mean, there was a real life and death situation there, but they were acted out with some sort of dignity. He told us a story about a guy who got shot down in the Pacific, ran into another plane, and they both ejected from the plane. They both made it, and they made it into the ocean. But the ocean was filled with blood at this point because up in the hills of these mountain islands, people had been killing each other so much. World War II was occurring, obviously, and blood was coming down through the streams into these bays, and the shark population had grown. They had gained a taste for human flesh. So when these guys went into the water, the boat would go out to get him, and it was an American boat. And the Japanese guy was closer to shore, and he waved on the boat. The boat went out past the Japanese guy, went and got the American guy. The American guy thinks, what a great guy. He comes back, and since it was so dishonorable to be captured in the Japanese fleet, that the guy, when he reached down, the American guy reached down to pick up the Japanese guy out of the water, the Japanese guy grabbed his hand and pulled out his gun and tried to shoot the American guy, and then tried to shoot himself, but the gun was so waterlogged that it didn't go off. And so they had this guy in a prison camp for a long time. Anyway, both of them survived the war, and they met at a ACES convention in Tallahassee, Florida in 1988 or something like that. And they both survived this whole thing and are now living.
It's an incredible story.
Unbelievable. This sequence here, I find to be probably the most disturbing sequence in the film. When everything goes quiet for a second up here when James King dies.
We tend to have these very, very kind of sanitized wars. War today is about the war we're not having. War today is about the nuclear war and deterrence and things like that. But back then, people marched into your town, and they broke the door down to your house. And they moved into your house, and things you and I could never imagine today were just a daily part of people's lives in Europe during wartime. And America has never had to suffer that. We've never had anyone attack us on American soil other than this event. This is the one event in which Americans were attacked on their own soil. And what you realize is people didn't like it,
Movies, and I just love doing it. I love the process. I love the people I get to work with. You go to some of the most exciting places in the world and work with the most exciting people. You have the ability to make for an individual. As an example, we've been very fortunate to give real serious opportunities to people like Eddie Murphy and Tom Cruise and Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. They all kind of grew up on some of the films that we put them in. And then again to give Josh Hartnett, and then earlier Ben Affleck, the ability to become movie stars. Kate Beckinsale, another one. That for me is a real gratification that you have the ability and to change their careers with one movie. And that is a great thrill because we really believe they're enormously talented, and that's why we fight very hard to get them in our films, sometimes against some amazing odds of people who are paying for the movies who don't want them in it. So, that's fun. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't love to, work with the huge movie stars, we also get the opportunity to do that too. So, but the real thrill comes from finding the new kids and giving them that opportunity. And the director's the same way. The fact that you could take a Michael Bay and give him that first movie and let the world see how gifted he is. And Boaz Yakin, turning his career into, lighting his career on fire. That's great fun. Pictures, and now we've gotten into television. It's very time consuming, and if you want to succeed, you got to put the effort and the time and the energy into it. And also, you have to have talented people surrounding you. That's really key. For me, what's important is, can we get it right? Can we entertain people? Can we have a good time doing it? Is this going to be fun? And Pearl Harbor was stressful in getting the money, but great making the movie. Michael had the entire movie in his head. He knew what he wanted to do, so it was a pleasure to make that film. We try to approach all our projects that way, by getting in business with people that you want to be around, that you want to work 18, 19 hours a day with, that don't force you to go home and pull your hair out. But then you have to figure out how to promote it and how to sell it. And Disney and Dick Cook and his people are just phenomenal at selling motion pictures. They've been planning the release of this picture. I bet you this prior to the time we started filming it. So it took enormous amount of care to get the right theaters, to buy the right spot timeline, because you have to buy that in advance for your commercials, to think of that Pearl Harbor premiere and coordinate it and arrange it and get all the appropriate people there, the security, the enormous undertaking of promoting a motion picture around the world. And then you go to Mark Cerati, who's international, and he's got the same problems that Dick does domestically. Getting the countries, the right theaters, set the premieres in every country, because it's all different. So he's doing, we did one huge premiere in Hawaii and a smaller one in Washington. You got this big job of going to France and England and Germany and Japan and Australia, and so it's an enormous undertaking for a company to promote a movie of this size and get it promoted right, and they did an amazing job. And they took Michael and I to Japan. We were in Germany. We were in France. We were just all over the world selling this picture, and that really helps because when the filmmakers go out there, it means they really believe in the movie and they believe in what they've done.
Us popping up kind of everywhere there was any action, this is one of the criticisms. I think, in order to kind of put the story together, that they took these two guys, and Welsh and Taylor, and then put them in a couple of other places, the Battle of Britain and the Doolittle Raid. So there were kind of amalgams of real characters. Real people did all these things. I think Michael was worried about spreading out the emotional focus of the story so that the emphasis would be kind of, the impact I think he thought would dissipate if he just had a bunch of different people doing different things, or that people wouldn't stay with it, or that, and there was still some talk. I remember Schwartzman, when we were filming, like cutting guys out of the wreckage of the boat, he's saying, "Hey, it's been a long day for you guys," It was sort of some question as to whether or not we were sort of everywhere at once. I don't know, I didn't hear afterwards when people mentioned that. They seemed to be preoccupied with finding other things to be critical of. Although depends what review you read, everybody managed to find something to be really mean and unpleasant about the movie. I don't really take it personally in the sense that, some of the stuff was directed at us, or sometimes it would say, well, this is love story is hokey, but the bomb stuff is good. It's hard not to sort of be a little deflated, but also the movie is neither better nor worse, but just different from how I would have done it. In other words, neither Josh nor I directed the movie, so in that sense, I don't really take it personally nor wrote it, but I think there's sort of an unfair tendency to kind of hammer down on Michael and Jerry because their movies make so much money. People anticipated that this was going to be really financially successful, and people bring their biases and their prejudices into this, and it being such a different time, kind of, in terms of the sort of collective consciousness of the country, it was, the critics, for whatever reason, weren't very open to seeing the movie neutrally, whereas the public seemed to. me in a way. There's a whole bunch of people went to see the movie. It's sort of, I mean, I think, some people, movie critics it's the kind of thing where it's like, there are a lot of these guys whose advice I wouldn't take on an interpersonal level about what movie to see. In other words, if I just saw them, sitting down over a cheeseburger and they said, did you think this movie was good? And I'm looking across at somebody, I would probably make a lot of assessments of them that would, make me think this person's not in my demographic, or it's not somebody I would get along with, and therefore it's not somebody whose opinion I trust. But it's a tricky thing, and I think basically if you pay too much attention to critics, it can just be destructive to your work and make you self-conscious.
Okay, Disc 2, Part 2 of film, coming soon.